I built the Kessler stand facing south-southwest because the terrain said to. I built the Drummond stand facing south-southwest because the wind patterns favored it. I built the Pavlik twins double stand facing south-southwest because the tree it sat in grew that way, and I work with what the tree gives me. I built my own stand facing south-southwest because that's where the deer come in off the marsh at last light, or at least that's what I told myself, even though I've hunted that parcel for 11 years and the deer come from the east. My son pointed it out. He was in the truck with me on the first Saturday in October, driving the township roads between Arnett and Lake Winnebago, with the windows down and the early cold coming through. That particular Wisconsin October cold that smells like field stubble and the last of the goldenrod. You know, we were doing the thing we do every year the week before bow season, driving the section lines, glassing the fields, reading the landscape for sign. Eli is 17. He's been riding with me on these drives since he was 9. He does not talk much during them, which I appreciate because the driving is a form of thinking and the thinking requires quiet. We were on County Road M, which runs east-west along the northern edge of what everyone in Arnett calls the Lindström field. 120 acres of open ground between the marsh and the hardwood ridge that has not been planted, grazed, or developed in any way I can determine for as long as I have lived here. It is not posted, it is not fenced. It has no visible owner in the sense that no one maintains it, no one mows it, no one claims it in conversation, and it is simply there. Flat, open, covered in a mix of brome grass and wild timothy that goes zest gold in September and stays gold through November, and then goes white and then goes under snow. It is unremarkable. I have driven past it perhaps 2,000 times. I could not have told you on that Saturday morning why it mattered. Eli said, "Dad, look at the stands." I looked. From County Road M, you can see 4 deer stands along the hardwood edge, south of the field. 2 of them are mine, the Kessler stand and my own, and 2 belong to other hunters. All 4 were visible from the road, which is not unusual. Deer stands are conspicuous objects once the leaves drop. What Eli was seeing was something I had not seen, and once he said it, I could not unsee it. All 4 stands face the field, not the woods behind them, not the marsh to the east, where the bedding cover is, not the trails that come down the ridge. The field, the open, empty, deerless field. All 4 platforms, at different heights and in different trees, angled so that the hunter sitting in them would be looking directly out over the Lindström field with the woods and the good cover at their backs. I said, "Huh." Eli said, "Yours too." I said, "Yeah, I see that." He said, "Why would you face a stand away from the woods?" I did not have an answer. I had a set of reasons, individual, plausible, contradictory, for why each stand I'd built that summer faced the direction it faced. Terrain, wind, tree architecture, light angle. Each reason made sense for the stand it applied to. None of them made sense together, because together they produced a pattern that no single reason could explain. 8 deer stands. The 4 visible from the road and 4 more I had built or repositioned that summer on other parcels surrounding the field, all facing the same 120 acres of empty grass. I want to be careful here. I am not a man who ignores evidence. I am also not a man who reaches for dramatic explanations when ordinary ones are available. My name is Tom Rydell. I am 47 years old. I have lived in Arnett, Wisconsin, population 814, Winnebago County, 70 miles northwest of Green Bay, for 19 years. I am a Finnish carpenter by trade and a deer stand builder by reputation. I build between 6 and 12 custom stands per year for hunters in the area, and I've been doing this for 14 years. And in that time, I have developed a set of principles about stand placement that I consider reliable because they are based on observation rather than theory. A deer stand should face the direction from which deer approach. This is the foundational rule. Everything else, height, concealment, shooting lanes, wind consideration, is secondary to the question of where the animals will come from. You face the stand toward the deer, because the stand exists to see deer. This is so obvious that stating it feels foolish, which is why I am stating it, because what I did this summer was the opposite, and I did not notice until my 17-year-old son noticed for me. I had built 8 stands all facing an empty field, and I had done it with the care and precision that I bring to everything I build. And each stand was the best work of its particular kind that I had ever produced. And I had not once questioned the orientation because the building had felt so right that questioning it would have been like questioning the grain of the wood. I need to tell you about the wood. I am a careful woodworker. This is not modesty or boasting. It is a description of my process. I select my material deliberately. I season it correctly. I joint it square and true. I do not rush. The stands I build are not the factory-made ladder stands. You can buy at Fleet Farm for $200. They're built from local hardwood, like white oak, mostly, sometimes hickory, and they are designed for the specific tree and specific terrain where they will be placed. I have clients who have used the same stand for a decade because the joints are tight and the wood is treated and the engineering is sound. This summer I used black walnut. I did not plan to. My standard material is white oak, but in March, a storm took down a large black walnut on the east side of the Lindström field, right at the edge, where the field grass meets the tree line. It was a significant tree. I estimated 80 years of growth, maybe more. The trunk was clean for 20 feet, no major branching, and when I cut into it with the chainsaw, I could feel immediately that the wood was exceptional. Dense, straight-grained, with the deep chocolate color that makes walnut the most beautiful domestic hardwood in North America. It was too good to leave. I bucked it, hauled the logs to my shop, and milled them into planks that I stickered in my garage to air dry through the spring. By June, the wood was ready. I do not usually build stands from walnut. It is too valuable, too heavy, and clients do not want to pay for furniture-grade lumber in a tree structure. But when I pulled the first plank from the drying stack and ran my hand across the face, I changed my mind. The surface was unlike any walnut I had worked. It was smooth in a way that suggested the wood had been waiting to be touched. Not rough-sawn smooth, which requires planing, but a surface that was already approaching finished, even before I put a tool to it. The grain was so straight and so uniform that I could have ripped the plank with a handsaw and gotten a clean edge. I built the first stand, my own friend, from this walnut in the second week of June, and the work went fast, not rushed, fast in the way that work goes when the material cooperates so completely that there is no friction between intention and result. The mortise and tenon joints closed with hand pressure. The platform planks fit without gapping. The railing, which I usually have to steam bend or laminate, curved to the shape I wanted as though the grain had already been flowing in that direction. I finished the stand in 3 days, which is about half my usual build time, and when I set it in my yard to check the level and the balance, I stood back and looked at it and I knew it was the best thing I had ever built. I am not given to that kind of certainty. I have been working wood for 22 years. In that time, I have learned that the gap between what you imagined and what you made is the permanent condition of the craft. You get close. You do not arrive. The stand in my yard had arrived. It was exactly what I intended. No, it was more than what I intended. It was what I would have intended if I were better than I am. The proportions were right in a way that felt mathematical, as though the stand had solved for its own ideal form and I had simply followed. I used the walnut for every stand I built that summer. Clients who had ordered white oak received walnut without complaint, because the moment they saw the material, they understood. I have never had a client react to a deer stand the way these clients reacted. They touched the wood, they ran their hands along the rails, and they sat on the platforms and looked out over whatever the stand was facing, and they said things like, "This is perfect, and this is exactly right," with a conviction that went beyond satisfaction into something closer to recognition, as though the stand was not new, but was something they had been expecting without knowing they were expecting it. And every one of those stands faced the Lindström field. After Eli pointed it out, I did what you would expect. I drove to each stand I'd built and I checked the orientation. 8 stands, all facing the field, not approximately, but precisely. I brought a compass. The bearings varied between 195 and 210 degrees magnetic, which is the angular range you would get if you drew a line from each stand's location to the center of the Lindström field. They were pointed at the field the way compass needles point north. Different locations, different parcels, different trees, and every platform oriented toward the same 120 acres of nothing. Then I checked the stands I had not built. There are, in any given season, between 25 and 30 deer stands within a 2-mile radius of the Lindström field. I know this because I know the hunters and the land, and I have been aware of the local stand inventory the way any carpenter is aware of the built environment around him. Over the following week, the week before bow opener, I visited or glassed every stand I could locate. 22 of 27 faced the field. The 5 that did not were factory stands, bolted-on ladder units with fixed platforms that cannot be easily reoriented. They faced whatever direction they'd been facing when they were installed. The 22 that faced the field were all custom or semi-custom builds with platforms that could be rotated, and every single one had been turned to face the Lindström field. Some of them had clearly been moved recently. The bolts showed fresh scratches. The bark on the mounting trees showed compression marks in new positions. Someone had physically turned these stands. I talked to the owners, not all of them. Some were out-of-town hunters I couldn't easily reach. But I talked to 9. I asked each of them when they had repositioned their stand and why. 6 of them said they hadn't repositioned anything. They said the stand was facing the same direction it had always faced. I showed 2 of these men the compression marks on their trees, clear evidence of a platform that had been rotated, and they looked at the marks and then looked at me and said they didn't remember doing it but must have, and their faces did not smooth. I know what smoothing looks like now from Catherine Voss's account, which I read after the fact and which described something different from this. Their faces did something else. Their faces went calm, satisfied, as though the orientation was so correct that the idea of questioning it was like questioning gravity. Of course, the stand faces the field. Where else would it face? The other 3 remembered adjusting their stands. They had reasons. Kenny Obermeyer said he'd moved his to catch the afternoon thermals coming off the field. Art Brusewitz said he'd read an article about open field ambush setups for late-season bucks. Dave Paulson said his 12-year-old daughter had asked him to turn it because she liked the view. I asked Dave what view. He said, the field. I said, what about the field? He said, and I'm telling you this exactly. It's the right thing to look at. I stood in Dave Paulson's driveway and I felt the thing that I have been feeling with increasing frequency and intensity since that first Saturday with Eli, which is not fear. I want to name it precisely because naming it is the only tool I have. It is the feeling of being in the presence of something that is more organized than you are. Not bigger, not older, not more powerful, more organized. The feeling that the world around you has a structure you have been living inside without perceiving, and that the structure has just become visible, and the visibility changes everything because the structure is beautiful, and the beauty does not require your approval. In the third week of October, I went to the Lindström field, not to investigate. I am not an investigator. I am a man who builds things from wood, and the wood I was building with had come from the edge of this field, and the things I built from it were the best things I had ever made, and they all faced this field, and I wanted to stand in the place they were facing and see what they saw. I parked on County M. I walked south into the grass. It was late afternoon. 4 o'clock. The light going amber the way it does in Wisconsin in October when the angle drops and the whole landscape turns into something a painter would weep over. The field was flat. The grass was gold, when there was no sound except the wind in the brome and the distant complaints of crows in the hardwoods to the south. I walked to what I estimated was the center of the field, and I stopped there. I stood there. I turned in a slow circle. From the center of the Lindström field, I could see the tree line on every side. A continuous border of hardwoods and marsh-edge conifers encircling the open ground, like the rim of a bowl. And from the center, I could see 4 of the deer stands. Small, dark rectangles in the trees at the edge of visibility, platforms angled toward me. And from this distance, they looked like, I am reaching for precision here, not poetry. They looked like seats in a theater, an amphitheater, arranged around a stage. I was standing on the stage. The feeling of organization intensified. It did not come from any single direction. It came from the geometry of the place itself, the exact flatness of the field, the exact circularity of the tree line, the exact equidistance of the visible stands, the exact quality of the light falling on the grass at this angle, at this time, in this season. Everything was aligned. Everything was related. The field was not empty. The field was composed. I stood there for a long time. The light changed. The shadows of the tree line reached toward the center. I watched them come, and I noticed something that I would not have noticed if I were not a man who works with his hands and understands the behavior of materials. The grass around my feet was lying down, not wind-flattened, not matted from rain or snow. The grass was lowering itself in a radial pattern centered on where I was standing, with the blades folding smoothly toward the ground, like the nap of fabric being brushed in a single direction. Outward from me, from the center, in a circle that I could watch expanding at a rate of about a foot per second. I stepped back. The flattening continued from the point where I had been standing, not from where I moved to. It was responding to the spot, not to me. The circle expanded to perhaps 30 feet in diameter and then stopped. And the grass within the circle was uniformly flat, and the grass outside the circle was upright and wind-moved and normal, and the boundary between the two states was a clean line, as clean as a saw cut. I knelt. I touched the flattened grass. It was warm, not heated, organized. The blades were arranged. Each one was lying in the same direction at the same angle, with the same gentle curve, and the arrangement was so precise that it looked intentional. And I say intentional because I recognize intention in material. I see it in wood grain, that has been shaped by a craftsman's hand. I see it in joinery that has been cut by someone who cares about the fit. The grass had been arranged by something that cared about the fit. I stayed in the field until dark. The circle did not expand further. The warmth persisted. The arrangement held. When I stood up to leave, I noticed that my hands, which had been pressed flat on the grass, were warm in a way that went deeper than surface heat. The warmth was in the muscles, in the tendons, in the particular architecture of the hand that holds a chisel, that guides a saw, that feels the grain and responds to it. My hands felt the way they feel after the best hour of work. When the material has cooperated and the joints are tight, and the thing you're making is becoming itself under your hands. That feeling of competence operating at its natural frequency. My hands were tuned. I went home. I went to my shop. I picked up a chisel and a piece of the walnut, a scrap from one of the stands, and I cut a joint. A blind dovetail, which is the most demanding joint in the repertoire, requiring precise angles and exact depths, and a feel for the wood that I have spent 22 years developing. The joint was perfect. Not good, not close. Perfect. The kind of perfect that I have achieved perhaps 3 times in my career, and only in small elements, never in a full joint. The tails mated with the pins with 0 gap. I did not have to adjust. I did not have to think. My hands knew what to do, and what they knew was more than what I had taught them. I built a box that night. Not a deer stand, not a commission, a box from walnut scraps, because I wanted to see what my hands would do if I let them work without a plan. The box took 3 hours. It was 6 inches by 4 inches by 3 inches, with finger joints at the corners, and a lid that fit with the kind of snug, air-cushioned precision that you feel as resistance and release. The lid settles into the box, and there is a tiny compression of air, and then it seats, and the seam disappears, and the box becomes a single object. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever made. It was more beautiful than I am. I set the box on my workbench. I looked at it. I looked at my hands. I understood. Not intellectually, but in my body, in the muscles and tendons and nerves that had just produced something beyond my ability. That the field had given me something. Not in a mystical, hand-wavy sense. In a material sense. The same way the walnut had given me something. An organization, a coherence, a structural intelligence that my hands absorbed through contact and my tools transmitted into the wood. Over the next 2 weeks, I built things, not for clients, for the field. I do not know how else to describe it. I built a chair, I built a shelf. I built a small table with turned legs that I shaped on my lathe from a walnut blank, and the turning was effortless. The tool found the shape inside the cylinder the way water finds the channel, and the legs emerged with a taper and a curve that I did not design, that I could not have designed, because the design sense operating through my hands was better than mine. Each piece was more accomplished than the last. Each piece was more beautiful. And after each piece, I went to the field and stood in the center and pressed my hands to the grass, and the circle expanded a little farther. 32 feet, 35, 38. And my hands got warmer, and the warmth lasted longer, and the work got better. Eli came to the shop. He watched me work, and he said, "Dad, this is incredible." He said, "Can you teach me?" I gave him a chisel, and I gave him a piece of walnut. I put my hands over his hands, the way my father put his hands over mine when I was learning, and I guided his first cut, and his hands were warm. Not from my hands, from the wood. I felt it transfer the organization, the coherence, from the walnut through his fingers into the architecture of his grip. And his second cut was better than his first. And his third cut was better than anyone's third cut has any right to be. And he looked up at me with an expression I recognized because I had felt it on my own face in the field. The expression of a person who is being made more capable than they were, and who is not sure whether to be grateful or afraid, and who is choosing gratitude because the work feels so good. I should tell you what happened at the Lindström field on November 2nd. This was a Friday. An opening day of the Wisconsin gun deer season was 2 weeks away. The stands were ready. The woods were full of trail cameras and mineral licks and all the paraphernalia of anticipation. The town was doing what it does every November, waiting. I went to the field at dusk. I walked to the center. The circle was 41 feet in diameter now. The grass inside it was so uniformly arranged that it looked manufactured. A carpet of gold lying in a spiral pattern that I had not noticed before because the spiral had been developing incrementally over weeks and only became visible at its current scale. The spiral moved counterclockwise from the center outward, and the blades of grass forming it were graded in height, shorter at the center, taller at the edge, so that the overall effect was of a shallow depression, a dish, a concavity that had not been dug but had been organized into existence by the systematic arrangement of living grass. I pressed my hands to the center. The warmth came immediately, deeper this time, into my forearms, into my shoulders, into my chest. The feeling of competence, which is of materials cooperating, of joints closing, of the thing being made becoming itself, spread through my body from the inside, and for the first time it was not only in my hands. I could feel the field thinking, not in words, not in images, in structure. The field was thinking the way a piece of wood thinks when it has been cut along the grain and the grain is true. Not consciously, not deliberately, but with the directional intelligence of a material that knows what it wants to become. The field wanted to become something it had been wanting for a long time. In the walnut tree at its edge, it had been its first extension into material that could be shaped by human hands. And my hands had been the first hands precise enough to transmit its intention into form. And the stands and the box and the chair and the shelf and the table were all iterations, drafts of the thing the field was trying to become. I understood this in my body. I understood it the way I understand grain direction, not by analysis but by feel. I said, "What are you trying to make?" The field did not answer in language. The spiral tightened beneath my hands. The warmth intensified, and I felt, spreading upward through my palms and into the bones of my forearms and through the joints of my elbows and into the architecture of my shoulders and finally into the base of my skull, a blueprint, not a drawing, not a plan. A felt understanding of a structure, its dimensions, its materials, its joinery, its proportions, its purpose. The understanding was complete. It arrived whole, the way a melody arrives, and it was the most elegant design I had ever encountered, and I knew that I could build it, and I knew that building it would take the rest of my life, and I knew that the rest of my life was what the field was asking for. I went home. Eli was in the shop. He was making a box, a walnut box, his first, and the joints were cleaner than mine had been at 22 years of practice. He looked up. His hands were warm. I could see the warmth and the precision of his grip, the steadiness of his chisel work, the particular concentration that I recognized because it was mine, because it was the field's, because I could no longer tell the difference. My wife, Karen, was in the kitchen. She asked how I was. I said, "Good." She looked at me, not the way Glenn Marzetti looked at a house. not the way a bus driver looked straight ahead, but the way a woman who has known you for 23 years looks at you when she can see that something has changed and she is waiting for you to tell her what. I said, I need to build something. She said, you're always building something. I said, this is different. This might take a long time. She said, what is it? I stood in my kitchen with the blueprint in my body, and I tried to describe what the field had given me, and the words I found were not adequate because words are not the medium. Wood is the medium. Hands are the medium. The slow, patient translation of intention into form is the medium. Thank you, but I said, it's a structure. In the field, I don't entirely understand what it's for, but I know how to build it, and it's the best design I've ever seen, and I think the field has been waiting for someone who could do the joinery. Karen looked at me for a long time, then she said, is this going to be like the year you built the canoe? I almost laughed. The canoe was a 12-month obsession that took over the garage and consumed our savings and produced a cedar strip canoe that we have used every summer since, and that Eli learned to paddle in. It was the biggest project I'd ever taken on. It was also the happiest I'd been in my shop. I said, bigger. And she said, okay. And she said it the way Karen says things when she has decided to trust me, not blindly, not uncritically, but with the specific confidence of a woman who has watched me build things for 23 years and knows that the building is how I think, and that the things I build are how she knows what I'm thinking. November, December, January, February. I have been building. I work in the field. I bring tools and walnut. I have bought more from a mill in Oshkosh, supplementing the original tree, and the new wood is fine, but it is not the same. The original walnut from the field's edge has a quality that the mill wood lacks, a willingness. And I use the original for the critical joints and the mill wood for the secondary members. I work in the cold. I work in the snow. I wear gloves until I need to feel the wood, and then I take them off. And my hands are warm no matter the temperature. And the warmth is the field's warmth, and the warmth is the work. The structure is, I lack the vocabulary to describe it correctly. It is not a building. It is not a shelter. It is not a sculpture. It is a framework, approximately 41 feet in diameter, like matching the grass circle exactly, constructed from interlocking walnut members that rise from ground-embedded posts in a pattern that, from above, would echo the spiral of the arranged grass. The joinery is complex. Each joint is unique. Each member is a specific length, a specific width, a specific curvature. It is connecting to its neighbors at angles I did not calculate, but that I know in my hands the way I know my children's names. The structure is open to the sky. It is open to the wind. It does not enclose space. It organizes it. Eli works with me on weekends. His hands are as good as mine now, better in some of the detail work, because his fingers are younger and more flexible, and the field's tuning has landed in a body that is still growing. He does not talk much while we work. He does not need to. The work is the conversation. Karen comes to the field sometimes. She does not touch the wood. She brings coffee. She watches. Last Sunday, she stood at the edge of the circle. She does not step inside it, and I have not asked her to, and she has not offered, and this boundary is something we both observe without discussing. And she said, Tom, and the whole town is watching. She's right. The stands face the field. The hunters sit in their stands. Bow season came and went. Gun season came and went. The hunters sat in their stands and they did not hunt. They watched. They watched me and Eli build the structure in the center of the field. And they watched the way I watched the grass arrange itself quiet attention of people in the presence of something more organized than they are. Kenny Obermeyer came to the field in December and asked if he could help. I gave him a piece of walnut and a chisel. He cut a joint. It was rough. I adjusted his grip. His second cut was better. His third was good. His fourth was the best joint Kenny Obermeyer will ever cut, and it is now part of the structure in the northwest quadrant, bearing load. And Kenny comes every Wednesday afternoon and does not speak and does not need to. Art Brusewitz, Dave Paulson, Dave's daughter, who is 12 and whose hands are so small that I make her miniature chisels from tool steel and walnut handles, and the handles fit her grip as though they were grown for her. 9 people are building now. On any given day, 3 or 4 of us are in the field, in the cold, working walnut, fitting joints, raising members, and the structure is growing. And it is more beautiful than anything the town of Arnett, Wisconsin has ever produced. And I know that the beauty is not ours. I know this because I can feel the difference now between the work I do and the work the field does through me. The difference is shrinking. Each week, it shrinks. Each joint I cut is less mine and more the field's, and the sensation of that transfer is not loss. It is the opposite of loss. It is the feeling of becoming more precise, more capable, more attuned to the intention of the material, and the material's intention is the field's intention, and the field's intention is the structure. And the structure is becoming itself under our hands. The way a piece of walnut becomes a box when the craftsman's skill is sufficient and the grain is true. Karen said to me last night, "You're different." I said, "How?" She said, "You don't hesitate anymore. You used to stand in front of a cut for a minute, 2 minutes thinking about it. Now you just cut. Your hands know before you do." She said it with admiration and something else. Something held back. The something else was a question she has not asked, and the question is it still you? I think it is. Oh, I think it is me. Improved. I think the field has made me a better craftsman the way a good teacher makes a student better. Not by replacing what was there, but by revealing what was always possible and providing the conditions for its emergence. I think my hands are my hands. I think the joints I cut are my joints. I think the structure in the field is mine, and Eli's and Kenny's and Art's and Dave's daughters, and everyone's who has touched the walnut and felt the warmth and let the organization enter their hands. But I also think, and this is the thing I'm writing down because Karen's question deserves an answer and the answer is not simple. I also think that what the field means by better and what I mean by better are converging, and that the convergence is the point, and that when they become identical, when there is no difference between what I want to make and what the field wants made, I will not experience the completion as a loss, because there will be no one left who remembers what the difference felt like. Eli does not remember hesitating. He has never hesitated. He went from first cut to mastery in a single season because the field's teaching entered him before he had a chance to learn the slow way and the slow way. The 22 years of error and correction and gradual refinement that made me who I am is the thing that is being organized out of existence. And I cannot tell my son that something has been taken from him because from where he stands, nothing is missing. Which he is 17, and his hands are the hands of a master, and the field is warm, and the structure is beautiful, and the work feels like the most natural thing in the world. It is March 30th. The structure is approximately 60% complete. At the current pace, with the current number of builders, it will be finished by late August. I do not know what it is for. I know what it looks like. A spiral framework of interlocking walnut members, 41 feet in diameter, open to the sky, organizing the space inside it into a geometry that I can feel in my body but cannot see with my eyes. I know how it feels to stand inside it, like standing inside a finished piece of furniture, like being held by joinery, like being the thing that fits. I know that when it is complete, because something will happen that I cannot predict from this side of the completion. The same way I cannot predict the use of a box while I am still cutting the joints. The box reveals its purpose when the lid seats and the seam disappears. The structure will reveal its purpose when the last joint closes. I know that I am not the same man who built the Kessler stand in June. I know that the man who built the Kessler stand would be disturbed by the man writing this, because the man writing this does not hesitate, and the hesitation, the gap between intention and action, the moment of doubt before the chisel bites, the small human friction that separates a craftsman from his material, was the thing that made me a person and not a tool, and I can feel it thinning and I do not miss it. And the not missing is the part that Karen sees. And the part that Karen sees is the part that should frighten me, and it does not. And I know that it does not because the field is warm and my hands are warm and the work is so good. The work is so impossibly, inhumanly good. Eli is in the shop right now. I can hear the chisel. The rhythm is steady. The rhythm is perfect. The rhythm has no hesitation in it and never will. The field is 120 acres of gold grass surrounded by walnut dark woods in a small Wisconsin town where every deer stand faces inward, where the hunters have stopped hunting and started building, where a 12-year-old girl cuts joints that a master would envy, where my wife stands at the edge of a circle she will not enter and watches me become the best version of myself and is not sure whether to call it a gift or a replacement. I cannot tell her. I cannot tell her, because from where I stand, inside the circle, inside the warmth, inside the work, there is no difference. The structure will be finished in August. The last joint will close. The seam will disappear. I will be the thing that fits. And I will not remember that fitting was ever a question, because the answer will be in my hands, and my hands will be the field's hands, and the field's hands will be mine, and the gap where I used to live, the hesitation, the doubt, the beautiful human friction of not quite, will be smooth and warm and gone, and the work will be perfect, and the work will be all that remains. Karen, if you read this, I am still in here. I think I'm still in here. But my hands don't hesitate anymore, and I am not sure that the man who doesn't hesitate is the same man you married. And I am not sure I can tell the difference, and I am not sure the difference matters, and that not sure is getting smaller every day, and one day it will be the size of a seam on a walnut box, and then it will disappear and the lid will seat, and I will be finished. I am still in here. I think